Well, good morning and welcome to the second edition of the Emerald Publishing Focus on Editors-in-Chief workshop here in Australasia. My name is Aaron and I'm the newest Emerald Publishing Editor, ambassador also with the Australasian market. And it is my privilege today to speak to Dr. Faith Ong, who's also an Editor-in-Chief on the International Journal of Event and Festival Management. Good morning, Faith.
Good morning, Aaron. Very nice to be speaking to you today.
Thank you. Viv, can you tell us a little bit about the journal and what it represents in the field of event studies?
Well, I am Faith, and I'm the co-editor along with Dr. Louise Plett for the International Journal of Event and Festival Management. This is a Q2 journal in the Scopus rankings, and this is one of the few journals that's about growing the field of the events field of study. And as occasions that bring people together, events can really have a very focused or very diffused set of purposes. And these purposes really lend themselves to opportunities to research into the meaning of events, the way that events are organized, and the outcomes that can be pursued through design of the events. I come from a background where one of my jobs pre-academia was involved with organizing events. And those events really opened my eyes to a wide variety of event types and attendees and their impacts on attendees. So that gave me an appreciation for how events can impact people's lives. And that's a perspective that I bring into the journal itself.
Thank you so much. So obviously you've seen the journal evolve. You probably have published before you came on board as an editor-in-chief. What has been your experience like in working with the more the technical aspects of the journal? Has it been smooth sailing? Have you seen some best practices that you see from the journal and the publisher? And what would you think of in terms of recommendations for the future?
Maybe starting with my journey as with the journal itself. I started off as an editorial assistant in 2019. And then I moved into an associate editor role for a couple of years before taking on the co-editor role earlier this year. So it's been a gradual journey towards building topic area knowledge, developing an eye for detail, and learning systems throughout the years. So my co-editor, Louise, and I have just assumed that co-leadership earlier this year in January. And we have both had chats about where we want to bring the journal and what we want to the field of study to look like in the future and what we wish to encourage. So some of the topics that we hope to encourage for the future include topics such as technology in events. And in particular, how can we look at other fields of study so that we can not only adopt, but also innovate in these fields of study into events. We were also very interested in topics, in studies to do with longitudinal studies, especially when it comes to resident impacts, legacies, and attendee impacts. All of these have social outcomes that are very important for both the residential communities as well as the attendee communities that are focused for the event. Within our areas, sustainability is, of course, a growing area still. And I think increasingly the study of what kinds of resources are used, what kinds of resources are generated or regenerated in events has become something that's quite interesting and has captured quite a lot of interest in the past few years. And I think contextually, traditionally, a lot of the research has been so far concentrated in Europe, in Australia, in the US. And as an editorial team, increasingly we're looking at seeking more interest in publishing research from other areas, such as the Asian, Latin American, Middle East, and African regions.
Thank you so much for taking us through a little bit about your journey through the journal and also looking at the leadership roles and potential topics and geographical areas where the journal is moving towards in the future. So obviously a lot of the roles looking at the leadership of a journal, such as the editor-in-chief positions, come with that element of mentoring and support and how you also may change some of the developmental cultures to bring succession plans for the future. Have you and Louise thought about some of these areas of developing aspiring scholars who might want to work with the journal in some shape or form in the future?
Mhm. I think some of these initiatives that we have at IJEFM really started off with Judith's leadership. So Judith Mayer, who's an associate professor at UQ, was the previous editor-in-chief of IJEFM. And she and I had discussions about ensuring that we had a spread of representation in our editorial advisory board, and that's where we start from. We also have had open calls for reviewers, where we encourage reviewers who have an interest in events or published in events to be part of our reviewer pool, to not only gather expertise from within the event field of studies, but also to gather expertise outside of this field as well. As you mentioned, in terms of succession planning, it's a bit too early for Louise and I to talk about succession planning, seeing as how we've just started. But I think in assuming this role, one of the things that has been quite important has been the academic support group that we surround ourselves with. Personally, I've been very lucky to have had an academic support group that's made up of senior researchers who share their experiences navigating challenges, and very often they're very generous with their experiences and helping us mentor us through some of these issues that we might face. This academic community group is also made up of peer researchers who are at similar stages in our careers, and therefore we're better able to also share tips and tricks about life challenges, particularly if we've got similar challenges. And in terms of mentoring, we also have early career colleagues, and personally, early career colleagues often offer very fresh perspectives on issues, and I find myself learning quite a bit from them. So I take sort of a little bit from each generation, I guess, of researchers to try and make this an inclusive community, and one which seeks the input of quite a diverse group that we look at.
Thank you. And obviously, taking on the editor-in-chief role, it's also a balancing act around some of the other personal, professional work commitments that we have. How do you go about, putting this on? Obviously, a very busy work life, but also balancing that with your personal commitments.
Well, in our academic role, particularly where I am, we've got the teaching, the research, as well as service. And most people have a mix of quite a few of this. Personally, I find that teaching provides quite a structured demand on my time, which I can work around quite predictably, because when semesters do start, and teaching is fairly consistent and regular. My research then forms an avenue which informs my teaching. And I think my research actually allows me to bring my work into the classroom, which keeps teaching interesting for me, but also allows me to bring a much more enthusiastic version of myself into the teaching classroom. So I find that enthusiasm has positive impacts on students' learning experiences. So I'm quite happy to bring my research into that teaching role as well. And often when I think about these three parts of my job in concert with each other, sometimes they can be at odds with each other. There are peaks and troughs when it comes to work and how busy you get. But I try to find ways that harmonize them and have them work together so that there's space for all of them in my career.
Thank you for your input. And obviously, it's always an ongoing learning journey with the journal, your roles, and understanding some of the shifting trends and demands of academia moving to the future. Just going to come back to the journal and looking at the role that Emerald Publishing is able to support the journal and some of the goals and the visions moving forward. Looking at the short or middle term future, 3 years, 5 years, what would you like to see perhaps from the journal support in terms of getting the alignment into different geographical regions or different topical areas? Are the areas that you would see publishers like Emerald coming on board with you in a more supportive way that is not necessarily yet well developed. Obviously, things like AI are works in the making, but there are other aspects that you would see valuable support as in your role of editor-in-chief.
Absolutely. I think my experience with Emerald has been that they're very, very supportive of anything that Louise and I propose. And particularly because we've just started in the role, there is a lot of consideration towards letting us know where some of the potential pitfalls could be. So things like, as you mentioned, with AI, paper mills, etc., they do have some established advice in regard to safeguarding against these potential pitfalls. But I think generally across the board, particularly with our commissioning lead, she's really come in with a very much a can-do attitude. And she works with us to grow the journal in terms of reach, and regularly has conversations with us about our needs as editors. And that's where we get to bring in the new ideas that we want to test, new initiatives that we suss out with her as to what can be done or what needs to be developed for us to do our job better. And that then grows the journal itself. They've been very supportive with helping us diversify the topics. So when I mentioned some of these topics that are that we look to growing into the future, some of them have had proposals for special issues which we've brought to Emerald, and they've been very supportive of these special issues to help us not just grow the journal itself, but also grow the events field of knowledge. Generally, I find Emerald quite happy to resource our endeavors and to try new things with journals. And I think they proactively bring up new issues that come along. Sometimes as we conduct our role as journal co-editors, we might be quite mired in the details themselves. And occasionally, the commissioning lead does have meetings with us where they bring up newer issues or newer tactics that people may be trying to use to circumvent some of our systems and getting us to be aware of some of these issues, but also grow and expand our journal through the topics that we actually feature.
Thank you so much. And indeed, very heartening to hear experiences and how it's a forward-thinking, co-created environment to take the journal, but also the field of research forward as well. I'm just going to ask a final question here. Faith, if you like to share for young, aspiring women or people from different backgrounds, thinking of the role of an editor-in-chief sometime into the future, what would your advice be for them?
I think if you're aspiring into leadership positions, there is a lot of groundwork, a lot of background work that goes into being recognized as a strong member of the academic community. And that requires consistent and strong research, your own research, and being known for your area of expertise. But also, equally important is keeping good connections with the community. Very often opportunities that come up, there is an element of who comes to mind when these opportunities come up. So there is some consideration of your own priorities when you take on these opportunities, but also the current leadership's priorities when it comes to allocating some of these opportunities. These experiences, I think, really help you grow as an individual. Personally, they've really served me well by growing my all-round academic skills and helping me build the network that's been really invaluable. And that comes back to that academic support group that you can surround yourself with. Hopefully, these are people who can give you good advice, who are good sounding boards, and also will be willing to be critical friends who are willing to tell you when something is wrong as well. So I think if you're aspiring to leadership positions, being an area expert is important, but your networks are just as important as well.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing this morning, Faith. We'll put this onto the Emerald system, send it out to our networks. And again, thank you and welcome. I
My
hope all the
pleasure.
best goes well for your journey as editor-in-chief.